the 00 timer. It's almost like, oh, there we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2024 Orleans Senate District Debate between Katherine Sims and Sam Douglas. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I'd like to thank the candidates for showing up. I'd like to thank all the people who submitted questions ahead of time. I'd like to thank Todd Pronto and NEK-TV and Terry also for doing this nice streaming service that they're doing online. It is on YouTube. Hello, YouTube people, and Facebook people. Hello, y'all. I'd also like to thank Tabitha Armstrong from the Newport Daily Express, who's going to be answering questions and for promoting the event also. I'd like to thank Lake Region Union High School and Kathy McCoy for helping with scheduling, and Bob DeRowan for his technical assistance. So the rules for this debate, they're going to be 90 minutes. Each candidate will be allowed 3 minutes for opening and closing statements. Questions will be directed to the candidates, and the candidates will be allowed 2 minutes to answer the question. Then each candidate will be given an option for a 1-minute rebuttal if they choose to. We brought the magical lights from the years ago in the legislative breakfast. The orange light is a 15-second warning. The red light means you reach your time limit. And we're going to start with rock, paper, scissors to see who gets to go first. So,
Works to me.
we'll let them.
Do we 2 out of 3 or just 1?
Just one.
That works.
So now Katherine Sims has 3 minutes for her opening statements.
Thank you so much for being here in person and online. And want to just start again by thanking the Daily, the Chamber, NEK-TV for hosting this. It's so great to be here with you all night to talk about the issues that matter. So I'm Katherine Sims, and I'm running for state senate to fight for our rural values. 20 years ago, I came up here to milk cows at Butterworks Farm. Lived in a little one-room cabin and got up every morning to stoke the wood stove before heading up to the barn. And living with Jack and Ann Laser, I learned so much about hard work and perseverance. And while I moved here for a job, what I found was so much more. I found a community. I love living in a place where when you go to the general store, you know everybody's name. And our farmers provide us with fresh meat and veggies from right down the road. And when the flood hits, we don't wait to be asked. Everyone just grabs a shovel and pitches in to help their neighbors. Our rural communities are the heart of Vermont, and our way of life is under threat. We face pressing questions. In this economy, how will we make ends meet? Will my kids be able to find a home here, make a life here? Will I be able to retire in comfort and security? And how will our communities evolve without losing what makes them so special? We're at a tipping point. Our future depends on policies that truly support people being able to live and work and raise a family and retire here. And our needs are different than Chittenden County, and too often, Montpelier ignores them. It's going to take a lot of hard work and creative thinking to get to where we need to be. But I'm not daunted by challenges. Throughout my whole life, I've tackled challenges head on. As early as elementary school, fighting to get uniforms for the girls' team too. Or later, creating Green Mountain Farm to School to build school gardens all across the kingdom and support our local farms. Or organizing NEK broadband to help bring broadbands to every dirt road up here. And then later as a parent, working with others to create craft spray saplings so that we have access to more childcare here in our community. I know that when we bring people together, we can do big things for our community. And as a state representative and as a co-chair of the bipartisan Rural Caucus, I've fought to get stuff done for the kingdom. I advocate for things that are good for our region and our families. I help secure funding to build out broadband in the kingdom. I help make it cheaper and easier to build housing here in rural Vermont. I championed tax cuts for families, seniors, and military retirees. I reformed Act 250 to make it easier for our farms and our wood products manufacturers to stay in business. And I helped pass a bipartisan EMS bill to support our first responders. It also means that I speak up and vote no on things that aren't good for our region and will cause harm, like when I voted no on the property tax increase bill. We face big challenges, and it's going to take a lot of creative thinking to make that happen. We need practical, common sense solutions and experienced leaders who know how to put our needs first and get stuff done. I'm ready to move up to the Senate to fight for our rural values. Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine Sims. Sam, 3 minutes for your opening statements. Sorry about that alarm. I wasn't supposed to. Siri, open timer.
Likewise, I thank everybody for coming. I don't think I need 3 minutes, truth be told. I'm Sam Douglas, and I'm a Vermonter. I've lived here my entire life. My family has lived here their entire lives. I have relatives and ancestors born, bred, and buried in the town that I still live in. The town that I grew up in, I live still and rent the house that I grew up in. This is the Northeast Kingdom. We have challenges here, and I am acutely aware of them. And I know Katherine is as well. In the course of my campaign and the course of the last 4 years, I've knocked on thousands and thousands and thousands of doors. And I've heard from nearly every single one of them that they can't afford to be here. The affordability is the question that I think this entire race, this entire state election is about. If that problem is not solved, there will not be much Vermont left. The people that have been born and raised here, like myself, can't afford to live and work here. I can't afford to buy a house right now. My family lives on a shoestring budget, a razor-thin budget. Most times, I can't even afford to buy a coffee. Right now, we're facing in Montpelier a supermajority, a partisan supermajority that does not want to work with others, that does not want to work with the governor. And this has been expressed by many people in both parties. And I think that is a problem that we need to solve. We need balance in Montpelier. We need balance in all things, in all parts of life. That is a fundamental aspect of that I think has made Vermont great for so long. Look at Jim Douglas's memoir, one of my Everests to get because there's so few copies printed. He talks about his time in Montpelier when the party lines were blurred, when there wasn't fighting back and forth, when people could find common grounds on the issues that affect all Vermonters. And it doesn't matter whether you're red or you're blue, white, orange, indigo, it doesn't matter. Vermonters are Vermonters, and the problems that we have affect all of us. Chittenden County should not run the state. The Northeast Kingdom should not run the state. Vermonters should run the state. I'm running for Senate because I want to fight for the Northeast Kingdom, to fight for my heritage and my culture, the things that I grew up with, that I want my kids to grow up with, if we can have kids. And I want to make a difference, and that's why I'm running. And I know I have the patience and the fortitude to get things done. In my work in mental health, I work with a wide variety of people. I've sat for 13 hours, sitting at a dining room table at the facility that I work with, talking to people with suicidal ideation, trying to get them back to a semblance of normal living. Those are the things that I do in my day-to-day, the volunteer work that I do, Meals on Wheels with Northeast Kingdom Council on Aging. I'm concerned with the rural Vermonters that I represent. I hear it constantly, every door I go to, every meal I deliver, every person I talk to. Vermont has problems that need to be fixed, and it's not going to get fixed with a supermajority that will not work with anybody else but themselves. So again, thank you all for coming, and it looks like I did take all 3 minutes. So thank you.
Jonathan Armstrong, the Newport Daily Express. She'll be asking her first question to Katherine Sims.
Is it still
It'll
the
be,
same
it'll be,
format?
it'll be Sam.
So it's different than, okay.
So our first question will go to Sam. Because Catherine stood up first.
Oh, well, we were alternating.
Okay. Correction, we'll do Sam first.
All right, folks. So the first one is going to be really close to home. Following the release of the Oliver Wyman recommendations for Vermont's healthcare system and the proposals geared towards North Country Hospital in particular, what would you do should you become elected to protect Orleans County's hospital and the jobs and economic contributions that come with it? Let him know when you're ready.
Sam.
So I was pretty appalled when I heard about that. I heard about that while the meeting was still going on, and I was able to jump onto the live stream where they were first explaining it because a good friend of mine is on the EMS and he was invited onto the meeting. we need a hospital in the Northeast Kingdom. We can't afford to not have one. Where I live in North Troy, I'm having to drive all the way to Copley. If my wife is pregnant, that's too long of a drive. If someone has a broken arm, that's too long of a drive. And what I'm going to do is the same thing that I hope everybody else should be doing, and I'll be doing it in Montpelier, but we can all do this in our day-to-day lives, and that's advocate for the hospital, advocate for good quality health care, and advocate for expanding services for rural transportation, making sure that people can get to their appointments, and making sure that the hospitals doesn't close. We can all take a part in that. You don't have to be in Montpelier to stand up and make some noise. A good number of people in this room were at the meeting that we had at the Gateway Center, and you see how many people turned out for the community, turned out for that hospital. In Montpelier, I think that we need to have a little bit more scrutiny of what's going on with the Green Mountain Care Board, a little bit more scrutiny with what's going on with reports and consultants. I think that's a symptom of a growing problem that I've seen with Montpelier, in that an out-of-touch governing that does not understand the way things are up in the Northeast Kingdom. And I think that we need to have a little bit more scrutiny, a little bit more oversight on what consultants we hire, what boards we create, what commissions we create, and everything else that we do. We can't have out-of-touch people running this state. We need people that understand how it is. We can't have politicians that equivocate and talk for 3 hours and yet don't say anything during those 3 hours. So, I think I'm going to do what everybody else should be doing, and that's standing up and having a voice and talking about it and bringing the attention and the scrutiny.
Thank you. Yeah, really appreciate this question. This is absolutely a priority issue on the forefront, I think, of all of our minds. How do we keep our critical hospitals open? And I stand in strong opposition to the recommendations in the Nyman report. The hospital provides critical care to all of us. And what's particularly frustrating about this report is that our community's voice, I think many of us attended the public meeting in advance of the final report. That room was packed with people talking about how there had been a life or death situation where had North Country not been there, lives would have been on the line. And not only were our community's voices not heard, there were significant inaccuracies in the data in the report. The number of emergency department visits, for example, Oliver reported they were 10,000, when really we had 17,000 visits to the emergency department. And so to base recommendations around closing or downsizing hospital to a 16-hour urgent care facility based on inaccurate data is incredibly frustrating, and have been pushing the Agency of Human Services and the Green Mountain Care Board to publish a retraction or an addendum or work with the consultant to amend the report so that it's based on actual factual data. And I also want to talk about some of the things that I've already been doing to respond to this report. In advance of the release of the report, I worked with CEO Tom Frank to invite Chair Lori Holton, Chair of the House Healthcare Committee, up to North Country to tour the facilities and see in person the quality service that's being provided. We also visited Journey to Recovery and the front porch, the new 24-hour mental health care facility right next door, and the urgent care on Main Street, so that leadership in the House could see and experience in real time the innovative work that's happening, the commitment to quality and care, and hear firsthand about the strong financial position of the hospital. Tomorrow, with many of my colleagues, we'll be meeting with the Speaker of the House and someone from the Pro Tem's office at North Country again, so that we are standing united, that this hospital is critical to our community, and needs to remain open, and will continue to highlight the financial stability, the partnerships that are happening, and finding real ways to lower the cost of health care for all Vermonters. So,
Thank you, Catherine. Sam, would you like a rebuttal for a minute?
Sure. And my rebuttal is that I'm very happy that we agree on this issue, and because I think everybody in this room agrees on that issue, and I think everybody in the Northeast Kingdom agrees on that issue.
Taxes have been a top concern in this election. What do you propose to do to keep property taxes under control while still supporting local schools? And Catherine will start this one.
Yeah, thank you. So, too many Vermonters are struggling, and property taxes are an incredible burden. And our schools are incredibly important. They are under significant pressures. School spending was up $200 million this year over last year, in part because of the ending of the federal COVID relief funds, a 16% increase in healthcare costs, longstanding deferred maintenance, and inflationary pressures. But increases at that size and scale are unsustainable. And that's why I voted against the property tax increase bill, because we need to support a high-quality education for all kids, but at a price that taxpayers can afford. The yield bill that we passed included a commission on the future of education, and they'll be coming back to the legislature with recommendations about how to transform our education finance system. And I certainly will be advocating for an overhaul. We need to look at all the options on the table. One that I'll be advocating for in particular is looking at a foundation formula, which is something that the majority of other states use to fund education, where you use data and research to determine an adequate amount, which is provided to communities, and that helps bring up low-spending schools, and it helps bring down high-spending schools. Just yesterday, there was a report released, the PICUS report, which had really great news for us. It looked at what is the adequate amount needed to educate kids. Maybe I'll pause and we could.
We'll get you an extra 20 seconds there.
So it was saying, good news with the PICUS report that came out yesterday. It looked at, what is the adequate amount needed to achieve good outcomes for our kids. And the report back is that we can be spending $400 million less and still ensure a quality education to our kids. And that will prompt really, I think, important and difficult conversations about cost containment. We need to look at the drivers around education spending, rising healthcare costs, administration, very low staff-student ratios. I'm confident that if we explore a foundation formula, we can get to a place where we are providing high-quality education, but at a price that Vermonters can afford. And just want to add, I will be bullish on the topic of consolidation. I think and to fight for our small, local, rural schools. I think there are certainly some cases where building reconfiguration can lead to cost savings without impacting the quality of education for our kids. But here in our rural communities, where geographies and distances between schools are so significant, consolidation is not an option for many communities. And I've already fought hard to get language into the school construction working group bill that passed this last session to require the working group to consider geography as they come back with their recommendations. So I'll be fighting hard to reduce the cost of education and preserve and protect our small rural schools. Thank you.
So obviously this is a very, very complicated issue. When voters have to go to town meeting day and they need to sit through a 40-minute long presentation on how education is funded, I think that's a disservice to our voters, and that should definitely not be happening. I think we need to re-look at the way we fund it. We need to look at the formula. We need to rethink it, and it needs to be simplified. I think a lot of voters are very disgruntled and very frustrated with the quality of education they're receiving for some of the highest spending in the country. That report, we could be spending $400 million less and receiving roughly the same quality of education, and that is definitely something we need to be pursuing. If we're not pursuing it, then we're doing a disservice to the voters. Vermonters cannot afford the property taxes. The dozens and dozens of families that I have spoken to that are selling their homes and they're going to buy a camper van or move out of the state because they can't afford those property taxes. And it is specifically for those families, specifically the property tax issue. That's not even talking about the Clean Heat Standard or any of the other bills that are going to be coming out. So we need to rethink the formula. As the governor said, there's a lot of options on the table. We need to be open-minded and be willing to work across party lines and across every line to come up with what's going to be best for our students, what's going to be best for our schools, without sacrificing the quality of education or the services that we have. As a mental health practitioner, I'm very concerned about the growing rise of mental health issues in our schools. I'm very concerned about social isolation, social ostracization, using cell phones, internet, that are causing these, and don't forget, childhood trauma, generational trauma. We need to have adequate and equitable services for mental health care for our students, but we need to be able to afford those things without putting them on the backs of fixed income earners like our seniors, like our Vermonters with disabilities. So can we provide for those things out of other areas of the budget that's going to be making sure that we have everything that we need to provide good education with all the services that we have. We need to rethink a lot of things. Is this a time for rebuttal?
Well, she'll get a minute, and then you'll get a minute after.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you have a minute for rebuttal, if you'd like to. Okay, well, you can still use your rebuttal if you'd like.
Absolutely. So I would certainly like to bring attention to your comment about not voting for the property taxes. You did vote for the property taxes. You may have voted against the veto, but you still voted for them originally. You still voted for them on the floor. You still voted for them in committee. And the purpose of the committee is that's where bad bills die. Every legislator should know that. And if you didn't like the bill, if you didn't like the bill enough to vote for it on the floor, then you shouldn't have voted for it in committee. You know, just because it's an election year, votes shouldn't change. This is how our government works. If you don't like it in committee, then don't vote for it in committee. If you like it in committee, vote for it in committee. But don't change things when you get to the floor. That's, you know, we have to be honest to the voters.
I'd like to respond to that. So let me be clear. On the final votes on the property tax increase bill, I voted no. That's the vote when the bill passes into law. And I voted no because the increase was too high and because it lacked the cost containment measures that we need to have in place if we don't want to be here next year and the year after. And, you know, appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. For folks who haven't been there, maybe the kind of winding journey that bills take, they're less familiar with. I am not an obstructionist when I'm down there who's just going to vote no and watch from the sidelines. I'm there to roll up my sleeves and work hard to fight to make bills better for our communities. The yield bill is a must-pass bill. That means that every year we have to set tax rates to raise sufficient revenue to cover voter-approved budgets. Otherwise, schools could not operate. And I supported advancing the bill to the Senate after fighting very hard in committee for important changes. Some I was successful on, some I was not, to create space and time to continue to fight to find additional revenue, to lower the property taxes, and to add the cost containment measures I thought that we needed. When I was not successful, then I voted no on the final bill and stood with the governor on the veto override.
Thank you, Catherine. Tabitha, next question, please.
All right. So then this one will go to Sam. Staying still on this topic, what specific changes would you like to see made to education funding to reduce the tax burden while still ensuring quality education? So specifically about changes you want to see to funding and how it's funded.
Right. So as I said in my previous answer, I'll talk a little bit about the mental health care, and I'll talk about how I think that should be pulled out of other areas of the budget. We have a healthcare section of the budget for a reason, and I think that should be, the mental health should be coming out of that section of the budget. I think that will do a lot to reduce the property taxes there. In addition to that, I think we need to talk about, sorry, the question was about the funding specifically?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we need to relook at the CLA, the Common Level of Appraisal. I know I've been talking a lot with Scott Beck, and he has a lot of really good ideas about changing how that part of the funding works, how that part of the formula works, and I'm very excited to work with other parts of the legislation, other parts of work across party lines to make sure that gets done. So I suppose that's my answer there.
Catherine?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll build on the answer earlier, but maybe want to start off by addressing this idea of, you know, shifting education costs elsewhere. I do think it's really important that we differentiate what is sort of core education spending, you know, enrichment and instruction, and some of the other.
I'm sorry. I thought I shut up. Excuse me.
So I think we need to be clear about differentiating between like core educational spending and instruction and some of the additional social, emotional, and behavioral supports that are important to be offering in our schools so that all kids have a successful access to educational opportunity. And I think we have to be careful about suggesting that that money just come from somewhere else. There aren't that many other pockets, and if we shifted the social, emotional, and behavioral supports outside of our education fund, we would have to raise additional revenue through income taxes or other sources. So I guess I'd be curious to hear a little bit about where my opponent thought that money would be coming from. I think what's really important in this moment is difficult and important conversations about cost containment. What's next? As I said before, one thing that we looked at last session that I hope we continue advocating for is how most other states fund education with a foundation formula where we use data to determine an adequate amount to achieve educational outcomes, weighted, of course, for different factors in communities like rurality and sparsity. Right now, we have a scatter plot of schools spending some $10,000 per pupil and other communities spending over $25,000 per pupil. That's leading to vast inequities in delivery of education to kids. And if we, again, move to a foundation formula, we'd be providing a consistent amount for communities, which would bring down high spending and bring up low spending schools, ultimately saving property taxpayers important resources. And I just also want to recognize that we made really important changes around the CLA, the Common Level of Appraisal. Scott Beck's proposal was advanced this last session, and that's a change that we'll be experiencing next year, which I think should help during the budgeting process, avoid some of the big swings that budgets went through after the CLA was determined.
Thank you, Catherine. Sam, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Well, it's lovely to hear that you don't want to raise taxes. I wish that had been more of a focus in previous years. We have areas that we can go into the budget and we can find money for by shifting and finding our priorities. My priority is mental health for our students. My priority is good health, good education. You know, I think that should be the priority of most Vermonters. Maybe we should have that priority when we make our budgets, and we can find places in there to get the money out there to get it off the property tax. If you want to lower property taxes, you have to be willing to look at other options. And I think adjusting the budget for what's important and prioritize that. You know, what's important? Is it not moving around the budget, or is it lowering property taxes? And I think we have to be willing to consider that. So it's saying where's the money going to come from? We don't have any money. What's our priorities? Because we have the money for the things that we prioritize. So.
You have 1 minute for a rebuttal also, Catherine.
Thanks. Yeah, and part of how school budgets are determined right now is school boards set those budgets, having really important conversations about their priorities for their community, and then voters choose to adopt and approve those budgets, and then all of those bills get added up and sent to Montpelier, where we are obligated to set a tax rate to raise that revenue. 30% of our education fund comes from property taxes. The remaining 70% comes from other statewide sources that are fixed. Meals and rooms, sales and use, the lottery. And again, if we shifted some of those expenses out of our school budgets, we would have to find other ways to raise those revenues. Again, I think our focus should be working with school boards to find ways to be as efficient and effective with our resources, prioritizing kids' health and educational opportunity for all kids within the budget that Vermonters and property taxpayers can afford.
Thank you, Katherine Sims. Tabitha, next question.
All right, so Catherine will start this round. Vermont consistently faces significant budget pressures beyond just education, yet many in Montpelier have called for increased investment in critical areas like healthcare, housing, and infrastructure. How can legislators balance addressing those budgetary constraints and the education budget while still funding all the needed services and not making Vermont unaffordable?
Yeah, thank you. So too many in our community are struggling. Housing is scarce. Healthcare costs are through the roof. Property taxes are a heavy burden. And we absolutely need to stay focused on making Vermont more affordable so that people can live and work and raise families and retire here with dignity. I have on my website an 8-point plan about how I will work to make Vermont more affordable, and I'll, at a high level talk about that now and hope that we have more opportunity this evening to really dive into the details. I think it always begins with making government more efficient. Every year, the budget conversation is, what programs do we no longer need? What can we scale back? What is a more urgent priority that we have to make space for? And I think, for example, the General Assistance Motel Housing Program is one where we really need to think about whether that's the best long-term strategic use of our resources. So after we've had that important conversation about being as efficient as possible with our resources, we need to continue to focus on lowering the cost of housing, health care, property taxes, and utilities, so that the middle class is not feeling the strain in the way that they are right now. And it's also about making smart investments. How do we provide grants and loans to help small businesses start up and create more jobs in our community? How do we build flood-resilient communities so that we're not spending enormous amounts of our resources cleaning up after the fact around extreme weather events? And it's also, I think, always thinking about smart tax policy. Not only what are our taxes, but who's paying for them and in what ways, and shifting that burden from our middle class. I've helped champion tax cuts for families with the creation of the child care tax credit here in Vermont, expanding the exemption for Social Security exclusion for seniors, and creating a exemption for military retirees. And I want to continue that work to provide tax cuts for the middle class by looking at people who make over $500,000 and how they can pay their fair share so that we can lower taxes for the average Vermonter.
Thank you, Catherine. Sam, you have 2 minutes.
Would you mind repeating the question? It was a long question.
Vermont consistently faces significant budget pressures, in addition to education taxes. Yet many in Montpelier are calling for increased investments in critical areas like healthcare, housing, and infrastructure. How can legislators balance addressing these budgetary constraints while still funding these services and education and not making Vermont more unaffordable?
2 minutes will start now.
Thank you. Again, affordability is the green. Again, affordability is the number 1, number 2, and number 3 issue for all Vermonters. Every door I go to, people are telling me they're going to leave the state because they can't afford to live here. I think that is a serious problem that we need to address. And we can't go down there and we can't vote for things that are going to raise the cost of living for Vermonters. I'll draw attention to the Clean Heat Standard, the Affordable Heat Act. Both of those bills are, as we're all very aware, are going to raise the cost of heating for Vermonters significantly. It's unconscionable the way that the spending has been under the supermajority in Montpelier for the last number of years. What we need to be doing is we need to be building a stronger economy, and we can do that through very, very specific legislation. We can be reducing the number of taxes and fees for startups. In the first 5 years of a business, that is when they're most vulnerable, and that is when we see most businesses die. What we can be doing is we can be removing or reducing those taxes and fees for those first 5 years. We can be expanding our portfolio of commercial real estate to allow certain businesses to open up in Vermont. If you want to open up a brewery, you can't do it in an office space. You need to have high ceilings. You need to have adequate water and electrical connections. These are very specific things we need for very specific businesses, and by expanding our catalog of commercial real estate, we will be able to attract more businesses that would otherwise not come here. The governor had a plan to do this earlier this year that I really liked, of providing grants, providing funding for developers to come in and to do that. But again, the affordability question is the number 1 thing for Vermonters, and we can't be going down there and raising more taxes. All I hear is this tax, tax, tax. And every time I hear the word investment, I just think that's more taxes on Vermonters, that's more taxes on property owners, that's more taxes on your income. You know, the payroll tax is lovely. I've spoken to dozens and dozens and dozens of daycare providers and parents. Most parents I talk to don't even have kids in childcare. My mother runs childcare, and she understands, as many others do, that it's just taking money out of one pocket and putting it into the other pocket, and all it is just another tax on Vermonters, and we can't have any more.
Thank you, Sam. 1 minute.
Thanks. I think it's interesting that while we're talking about making Vermont more affordable and not having more taxes, the solutions that were being offered were spending more money with grants and loans for businesses. So I'd be curious how that all reconciles, where the money for those things come from. And since the clean heat standard was mentioned, I thought I would just respond about that. And to be clear, I support getting data and information to help the legislature make informed decisions. And in 2023, the Affordable Heat Act passed a study to look at how we can help Vermonters save money on heating fuel costs and reduce our emissions. Those reports are coming back now. The bill did not pass a carbon tax or require anyone to change anything about their heating system. That is a decision for the legislature to make in 2025. And as the reports come back, the estimates about the impact on the cost of fuel are alarming. $1 to $4 a gallon, and there is no way that I can support anything that would raise the cost of fuel for Vermonters right now. And I'll not only be voting no, but be working hard to make sure that the bill doesn't advance and isn't adopted by the legislature.
Thank you, Catherine. Sam, you have a minute.
Okay. It's very interesting that my talking about grants is not a good thing, even though you also talked about grants when you first answered the question. So grants aren't good when I say it, but they're good when you say it. And I would also like to refer back to, you say you didn't vote for the Affordable Heat Act, or sorry, you did vote for the Affordable Heat Act because it had a study and you wanted to get the data, you wanted to get the information. That's lovely, but in 2022, when the Clean Heat Standard was brought up, which was the first iteration of the Affordable Heat Act in 2022 versus 2023, you voted against an amendment to give a study period, to give that study to the Clean Heat Standard in 2022. So you don't like studies in 2022, but you like them in 2023 on essentially the same legislation. And I'm just wondering if this is an election year sort of thing, or what it is, because you can't have it both ways, really.
You have 15 more seconds.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Okay, okay, thanks. Tabitha, next question, please.
All right, so what do you see as, so this will be Sam starting this one. What do you see as ways for Vermont to be more business friendly and increase the tax base?
Okay, lovely. So again, I will refer back to, we need to have more varied commercial real estate to support more businesses, more different types of businesses. We can be reducing taxes and fees within those first 5 years. And we can be, we also need housing. That's another big thing. You can't have new businesses come in if you're not gonna have the housing base to support those people. We can create more housing with Act 250 repeals or reforms. And I think that's gonna be a very important part of the conversation. I'm sure you'd agree in this coming legislative session. We can have a modified Act 250. We can repeal Act 250 and replace it with a system that does essentially the same thing that Act 250 does, the things that we like it doing, the things we don't like it doing. And I've been very clear on this in the interviews that I've given, is that what I like about Act 250, and I think what most people agree that they like about Act 250, is that it protects our crucial ecological areas, that it preserves our natural landscapes, that it, we're not gonna have billboards. And I think we can still accomplish those things while allowing residential properties to be developed. Act 250 was never really intended to restrict residential growth. It was intended to restrict commercial growth and to protect our tourist appeal. So we can repeal or reform Act 250 to accomplish what we want while also allowing what we do want. And I think that's what we're gonna have to do. New Hampshire shares the same problems that Vermont does, and that's a very, very aging housing stock. A lot of our homes, so many of them, were built 80 to 100 years ago. And the truth of the matter is that we just need more houses built very, very quickly. In my work as a realtor, I see so many homes that don't go for FHA. They just will not. And I've, again, as someone who's trying to buy a home, trying to find a property that isn't just thrown together, the landlord special throwing, paint over the light switches, has been fairly difficult within our price point. So.
Thank you, Sam. Catherine, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. And again, the question is, how do we support small businesses in our region?
Yeah, so what do you see as ways for Vermont to be more business friendly to help increase the tax base?
Yeah, often hear from folks that it can feel like death by 1,000 cuts, that all of the individual regulations layered upon make it feel nearly impossible to start up and sustain a small business here in Vermont. And have worked hard to tackle some of the challenges that our working lands, our farm and forest businesses face here up in the kingdom, knowing how important that is for our economy. And so that's included reforming Act 250 for our farms and our wood products manufacturers over a period of the last 2 years, have been able to help loosen the hours of operation regulations and the prime ag soil mitigation fees that would be required by wood products manufacturers to start or grow their business, as well as address the barriers around accessory on-farm business development. So many of our farms are diversifying their products to stay viable. And while a farming is exempt from Act 250, those accessory businesses were not. This last session was able to move an amendment on the Act 250 bill to ensure that if you diversify your farm, you're not subject to Act 250. So have worked hard already to remove regulatory barriers that make it difficult for our working lands businesses. Have also worked hard to try to help support the forest economy with a VETA loan program to provide access to low-cost capital for loggers getting into logging to help afford the skidder cut-to-length machine that's needed, especially as our winters get warmer and the number of days you can be out logging diminish. So it's about regulatory reform, low-cost loans to help start up, and as Sam said, housing is another key piece. It's intersectional. Addressing, related to so many challenges that we face in our community. And that's why I stood with the governor and a group of tripartisan legislators to introduce a housing bill to make it cheaper, faster, and easier to build even in rural Vermont. And many of those provisions were included in the final Act 250 bill that we passed this last session.
Thank you, Catherine. Sam, you have a minute for rebuttal.
Sure. I admire the talk about having farm businesses and agricultural businesses. But the truth of the matter is Vermont is the 45th state in business friendliness. We are voted the last state or the worst state to start a business in 2024. And across the country, people see that, and business owners don't want to come here. They don't want to start a business here. A friend of mine, he runs an international chemical storage company, and he would like to bring manufacturing to the state of Vermont, but he doesn't want to because he knows that our business policy and our business culture here is terrible. And we need to be supporting a wide variety of different businesses to create that business growth. I think Orleans County in particular has a great opportunity for that, especially around Barton and Orleans, where we have the logistics hubs of those interstates, where you have the Port of Montreal to the north, you have Boston, you have New York City, you have Buffalo, and that land use bill, I don't believe that is going to be helping our residential development. From what I've seen, that's going to be helping Newport City, and it's going to be helping Burlington. It's not going to be helping Irisburg. It's not going to be helping Troy or Westfield or Jay or many of the other rural towns. And that is something that the governor has been very clear on for that particular bill.
Thank you, Sam. Catherine, you have 1 minute rebuttal.
Yeah, well, the details of the bill really matter and have worked hard to advance many of the recommendations put forward of the bill that I co-sponsored with the administration and tripartisan group of legislators, and include a number of different ways that we can incentivize building, including up here in rural Vermont. And so we were able to include a tax freeze for folks who take on blighted and abandoned buildings. So if you purchase a property and you're going to turn it into housing, the value will be set for 5 years at the grand list, and you can make improvements as an additional incentive to help people take on rehabbing some of that existing infrastructure that we have in our communities. Also to able to advance a number of grant and low-cost loan programs for private developers, knowing that often they can make dollars go a little bit further than our nonprofit housing partners. So that's grants to bring dilapidated units back online, and grants for private developers to take on larger rental housing project development. And the Rural Caucus, we fought hard to make sure that every community, including our small rural communities, have an opportunity to grow by adding an amendment that fully exempts housing development in our villages, not just our big downtowns, from Act 250 for the next 3 years. And that will be significant for our communities here.
Thank you, Catherine. Tabitha, next
All right.
question.
So Catherine, we'll start this round. I'm just rephrasing the question. A lot of these came in from readers. So you've both mentioned housing tonight, and you've also mentioned, the need for increased infrastructure spending. So would you consider raising taxes if needed to cover the costs of these much-needed investments? And if not, can you specify exactly where you believe cuts need to be made in the state's budget to achieve that balance?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a both and kind of question. Again, the kind of top number one item on my affordability plan is about making government more efficient and effective. And there are a number of programs, like I think the Vermont Economic Growth Initiative, VEGI, or Efficiency Vermont, or the General Assistance Housing Programs are existing programs that I think we need to look at to make sure that they're being run efficiently and effectively and really delivering what we need up here in our rural communities. So yeah, absolutely. I think that there are savings that we can find within our existing budget to better allocate towards our priorities around housing and healthcare, elder care, and lowering property taxes. And I also think we need to shift the burden from the middle class that I have, again, supported and championed tax cuts for families, seniors, and military retirees. And I think we need to do more. We need to fully eliminate the income tax on Social Security. We're only one of 9 states that still has that in place. I think we should continue to expand the child care tax credit for families and fully exempt military retirees from taxation on their pension. And I think we should be looking to those who have done very well in this economy, those who make over $500,000, who currently pay less in income taxes than your middle-class Vermonter, so that everyone is paying their fair share, which would generate $70 million that we can use to put back towards lowering the costs for middle-class Vermonters.
Okay. Thank you,
Finished on time.
Catherine.
Whew.
Sam?
So the question was about housing, and no, I'm not in favor of raising taxes to.
Sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. And no, I'm not in favor of raising taxes to try to address that. I think we do need to find areas in our budget, and of course, it's hard to pinpoint exactly where we're going to pull from the budget when the different priorities haven't been established yet. Depending on who gets elected, this session I'm not talking about us, I'm talking about statewide. There's going to be different priorities down there. There's going to be different people with different bills, and you're going to have to look at the budget as a collective and talk about where we can pull things from. And it's not going to be from one specific place. It's going to be across the budget. And if we're going to make investments into housing, we have to do it without raising more taxes. That is the one thing that Vermonters have been saying across the board. We can't have any more taxes. It's death by 1,000 cuts to the Vermonters of the state. Talk about the middle class is leaving. And, when we don't have a middle class, we're going to have people that can't afford high taxes and people that don't really mind if they have a lot of wealth. So we need to be preserving the middle class without overtaxing them. So no, I can't vote on any more taxes that are going to continue just cutting away at Vermonters. And I agree wholeheartedly about the Social Security. We need to be eliminating the Social Security. But we need to be able to bring in better policy. When you have Social Security in the budget, we can't just rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. We need to also have younger people coming in to take up the place of those tax dollars that we're missing out on. And as a young person, I have a very intimate insight on exactly what is going to bring in young people. I've been very clear about that on my website, and what's going to retain our families, retain our young workers. And those are things like bringing in and encouraging the development of amenities, having the housing, having affordable, well-paying jobs, and not just really hurting people on where they're trying to live. I rent. My rent has gone up several times in the last year, and again, that goes back to the property taxes.
Catherine, you have a minute for rebuttal? No? You're good? Tabitha, next question, please.
So you both have now spoken about Social Security and not taxing Social Security. So one of the biggest questions that we received from a variety of readers was, with Vermont having such a large population of senior citizens and a growing aging population, as well as many who are on military benefits, where do you stand on taxing of Social Security and military benefits? And if they were both to be exempt, as it is in other states, how could Vermont still meet its budgetary needs? So Sam, round start to you.
Well, half of my work was done for me because I answered that a lot in my last answer. Again, I do not support tax and Social Security. Our seniors, especially on fixed incomes, already have a hard enough time as it is, and the same thing goes for our veterans as well. But as I said previously, we can't, when we're pulling that out of what we're bringing as a state in tax dollars, we have to have something else coming in to take that place. And I think that is going to be, the future of that is going to be bringing young people into the state. We are one of the oldest states in the country. And I see this a lot when I talk with my work with senior citizens. When I talk door to door, they can't afford the tax on their Social Security. But we also need to have the young people coming in to take that place. And again, as I said, part of that is going to be attracting young people. We need to be pushing more trades. One thing that I've seen a lot of, and I experienced this myself growing up, is that when you're pushing young kids just college, how many of them come back when they go to college out of state? There's a lot of them that stay out of state. And I think we need to be doing a lot more to attract and retain the young people that we have, because those are going to be our tax base going forward. The younger generations are our workers. They are our families. They are a significant portion of our tax base, and without the younger generations, we're not going to be able to function as a state. So, yes, I do support eliminating the Social Security and the veteran tax and veteran pensions, but we also need to have additional funding sources to be able to bring in new taxpayer dollars to take the place of those dollars. And I suppose that's all the time I need on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Catherine, your turn.
Thanks. Yeah, so this is something that we voted on in the past and have strongly supported. So we now have the Vermont Child Care Tax Credit, where families with children get $1,000 per year for every qualifying child. We also increased the income exclusion for Social Security income by $5,000, and we created a new exclusion for military retirees up to $10,000. So those are things I've voted for and supported in the past, and will continue to advocate for. I've sponsored and supported bills to fully eliminate the tax on Social Security income, military retiree benefits. And again, as I said before, I think the key here is shifting the burden from the middle class to those who have benefited from our current economy, those making over $500,000 and corporations who, again, are paying less in income taxes than the average Vermonter right now. And so if we ask everyone to pay their fair share, we can generate sufficient revenue to offset those tax cuts to families, seniors, and military retirees.
Sam, you have a rebuttal? Okay.
That's it.
Next question.
All right. Next question, we'll start with Catherine. Though Vermont's median income is around $41,500 and Orleans County alone is about $34,000, the legislature voted to increase their pay to a base rate of about $30,000 plus food, lodging, and mileage reimbursement. Where do you stand on this increased pay scale and the ongoing conversations about further increasing legislative pay and benefits?
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a really important question. So our legislature makes really important decisions that affects all of our lives. And if we want to have good, well-rounded decision-making, we need folks who have a diversity of everyday lived experience at the table weighing in on those conversations. And in order to do that, I think we need to make public service more accessible for diversity of Vermonters. Currently, legislators are paid a stipend of $13,000 and receive no benefits. And that makes service inaccessible for too many Vermonters. And the bill that was considered in the past would bring up the legislative salary to the in line with the average median salary of $35,000 per year. And we're seeing a troubling trend right now. There are 7 new candidates for office that are walking in without any competition, and there are 50 incumbent legislators who have no opponents. And without any competition, Vermonters don't get an opportunity to weigh the different choices, to hold their legislators accountable. Without that competition, and without making service accessible to a variety of Vermonters, I don't think we have the diversity of views that we want at the table, making decisions about how we make Vermont more affordable. And so I stand by that, I think, really important conversation about, and this isn't about people getting rich or making a bunch of money. It's about making public service accessible to the average Vermonter so that we have those common sense perspectives at the table to talk about the issues that are top of mind for Vermonters right now.
So I am one of those Vermonters that makes the 35 or less $1,000 a year, and I'm having no real issue running for office. Raising and doubling a salary, adding benefits, extending the length of legislative session, those are all things that I do not think that the state of Vermont needs. It is a job of service. It is not a job of attaining wealth. And I think that we have, the fact that we don't have people running for these positions is not a lack of that there's not people able to. I think it's a lack of just people not wanting to. We've seen a decline over time of volunteerism in our communities. I've worked a lot with the fire departments in the course of my campaign, and before that, I work a lot with volunteer organizations, and volunteerism has been declining significantly. And I don't think it has much to do, unfortunately, with the fact that people aren't able to afford it or not willing to take that step. I think it has a lot more to do with it that people, unfortunately, just don't want to. And that's why I give great respect to anybody that's willing to step up to run for any office. I'll make that very clear. I think one thing that this legislature could have done that would have made it a lot easier for people that are my age or people of any age and people of varying backgrounds and varying socioeconomic classes to run for office and to take that step forward is be putting caps on the amount that candidates are able to spend in their campaigns, putting a $10,000 limit on Senate campaigns, putting a $5,000 limit on House races, and maybe having no limits for statewide because it's so expansive. There are things that we could do to make it easier for people to run. And I have championed, well, maybe not championed, but I've talked a lot about anti-incumbency, putting in term limits for people. Those are the things that are going to make it easier for younger people to run. Those are the things that are going to make it easier for most Vermonters to want to step up and do this. Raising salaries, extending the length of legislative session, those are not things that are going to help out everyday Vermonters, of which I am one of them, and I am running. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Just want to be clear that the legislative pay bill did not include anything about extending the legislative session. I certainly think that our current system of January through May is adequate to accomplish the work that we need to every year. And the reality is there's a long list of legislators who have retired very early. I'm sure my colleagues here in the audience will remember Lucy Rogers, an incredibly smart, hardworking, passionate legislator who explicitly stepped down after her second term because she could not afford to serve, even though she was doing an excellent job and cared deeply about improving the quality of life for all Vermonters. And I've tried hard to recruit candidates. I've met tons of people who would be excellent at the job, would love to serve their community in that way, are all for it until they hear the details of the position, and they're not able to make it work within their life. And I think we all miss out when qualified, engaged, passionate, committed public servants aren't able to find serving the legislature accessible, and that we miss out when we don't have that diversity of perspective at the table.
Thank you. Good.
So you both talked on the next question. Were you doing a halfway through break? No, okay.
I would like another water bottle if that's all right.
All right, we'll just take a couple minutes and I will
Okay, we'll take
switch some question numbers around.
For Mother Nature and water.
All right. So we had a number of questions come in that were specific to certain topics aimed at the individual candidates. So we have one question each that's very individual. So we'll start with Sam. Sam, voters and opposition members have questioned your ability to serve in the Senate due to your age and inexperience, not just legislative or governmental, as you've never been elected to a position, but also in community engagement and work experience. It was asked why should voters choose you over your opponent's experience, and if you were to be elected, how you would navigate the Senate and create impactful legislation despite those misgivings. Could you hit the ground running, or would there be significant learning curves that could be detrimental to Orleans County?
Since this is an individual question, we'll give you 3 minutes and no rebuttal. Okay.
Sure. Yeah, so, and I appreciate the question. I understand the trepidation of the voters. But I already have hit the ground running on a lot of these issues, and I already have worked steadily with numerous members, incumbents who are already elected to the House and the Senate. And as for life experience, I really do question at what age do you magically gain life experience? If I was in my 50s facing someone in their 80s, does that mean I don't have life experience? Am I not old enough? To question the experience of somebody, nobody knows my entire experience of the breadth of my life. I think experience is more than just, the jobs you've been elected to. The work that I've done in mental health, talking to people, again, for hours and hours and hours about very important topics throughout their lives, helping them through their life experiences and talking them back down to a baseline where they're able to go back out in the community. That takes a certain life experience that I think we would all agree. My work with senior citizens, my work with volunteerism, again, I haven't really liked this question. This topic, because I find it mildly insulting to think that someone that doesn't know me can say I don't have life experience because I'm not as old as my opponent. Like, I just do not see how that has any relevancy within this conversation. So I suppose that's my answer.
Okay.
Katherine, you have been called out over your campaign season for voting for the Affordable Heat Act, and you've touched on this tonight. It's been asked how you could vote for it in committee and on the House floor, including its passage from House to Senate in 2022 when it was H0715, and again in 2023 before it was amended to a study. In the end, you voted to sustain the veto, or voted against it and voted to sustain the veto. Can you explain your? Sorry, I'm reading this question, but it's not. In the end, you voted it through as a study. Can you explain your rationale for supporting the bill through committee and voting for its passage before it was made a study, to your support for the current study?
Yeah, so too many Vermonters are struggling with heating costs, among other things. And we've all seen how volatile fossil fuel prices are. And I think we have a responsibility to help all Vermonters shift to more stable fuel sources and not leave our most vulnerable behind. And the intent of the Affordable Heat Act is to help folks save money on fuel while meeting our emissions reductions goals. And I supported looking into that. The study job was to say, well, what would it look like to implement a clean heat standard? Would it save people money? What would be the costs of running the program? What would be the impact on fuel dealers and gas prices? And set up a very robust process where all of those stakeholders are at the table designing the standard and looking at the impact of it so that can come back to the legislature in 2025 for the legislature to adopt, amend, or reject. Nothing will happen until there's an affirmative vote of the legislature in 2025. And as I said earlier, as those reports begin to come back and we're hearing from the PUC that doesn't feel like a workable mechanism for our small state here and that the impact might be to drive up the cost of heating fuels, there's no way I can support something like that. Vermonters can't afford to pay more in heating fuel costs, and so I will absolutely oppose the implementation of the Clean Heat Standard if it increases fuel costs. And that means not just voting no, but actively working with my colleagues to help them understand the impact of implementation of a program and how it might harm Vermonters, especially rural Vermonters, so that we're not moving forward with it if it raises heating fuel costs. And I think it's that simple.
Sam, you'll start the next round. The Agricultural Work, Labor, and Employment Law Study Committee was formed this past legislative session. Act 117 examines the application of Vermont's labor and employment laws to agricultural workers in Vermont. The goal of this committee is to identify potential legislative action to provide additional coverage for agricultural workers. So do you support legislation that would allow agricultural employees to form a union and engage in collective bargaining processes for wages, benefits, and living conditions? Also housing. Why or why not?
Thank you. So no, I do not support the legislation. I am a member of a union and I support unions, but in the particular case of, and I'm going to talk specifically about dairy workers here, when you have cows that are in milk and you have workers, and if you go on a strike, if you're not working, the cows still have to be milked, and that is very detrimental to the life and the welfare of that cow. And right there, you're now entering the areas of animal welfare. Is that cruelty to the cow because the workers aren't working? And I know a lot of farmers, and I've spoken to a lot of farmers about this issue, and it keeps coming up with all the farms that I visit and all the farmers I've spoken with, is that they have great they have great relationships with their workers. If they come to them and ask for a raise, they can sit down, they can talk about those things without sacrificing the welfare and the health of their herds. And I think this is a very important question. I know that the Farm Bureau does not support this measure, and I know for a fact that the majority of the farms, if not all the farms I've spoken to, also do not support it as well. And again, I'm a member of a union. I support unions. I support workers' rights, and I want people to be able to have adequate wages for the work that they do and have adequate conditions in the work that they do. But unfortunately, I just don't think that this is the right way to go about doing that for the health of the animals and for the constancy of the farm and for the, of course, the financial viability of that farm as well. So I suppose that's my answer there.
Yeah, I appreciate this question. This is an issue I've already gone to bat for our communities around. The initial version of this bill was not actually a study. It was removing the exemptions around unionization for farm workers. And working with the Farm Bureau and Richard Nelson and others, heard about the concern around what it would mean for our farms and brought in multiple farmers from our community to testify on the topic. And we turned what was going to be a detrimental implementation, doing away with the exemption that currently exists for agriculture, and turn that into a study. And proud that the Farm Bureau and others have been monitoring that closely, and we'll see what the outcome of that is, and we'll continue to go to bat for our region because agriculture is so important, and we need to make sure we're doing everything that our farms can stay viable and in operation.
Rebuttal?
Katherine will start off this round. Farming and forestry are important parts of our local economy. What have you done in the past to help farming and forestry thrive in the Northeast Kingdom?
Thanks. Yeah, so as I said in my opening statement, I came up here to milk cows on a dairy farm and fell in love with this community. Not only worked on a dairy farm, worked on a vegetable farm, helped at an apiary in the off session. I now actually continue to work on a flower farm. It's a nice kind of antidote to sitting in the State House all the time talking with people, to be out with the flowers. Shortly after coming up here to farm, started Green Mountain Farm to School to create markets for farms and get kids hooked on local healthy food and learning about agriculture with school gardens all across the kingdom. So agriculture and this topic is definitely near and dear to my heart. As I've worked in the State House, I've done a number of things to help support agriculture and the other half of our working landscape, forestry. So as I mentioned earlier, helped reform Act 250 to allow accessory on-farm business development without having to go through Act 250, and reduce the regulatory barriers for our wood products manufacturers so that they can expand without having to go through or pay the same price to go through Act 250. I was the lead sponsor and champion of a right to repair agriculture and farm equipment. Too often our private for-profit companies are using technology and modern equipment as an excuse to force folks to bring their equipment back to the dealer and pay high prices or have long wait times. And I think if you own it, you should have the right to repair it yourself. And so this bill requires those manufacturers to make available the tools, diagnostic materials, and parts so that folks can repair their own stuff. That passed both the House and Senate last session, but couldn't agree on the final version of the bill. And I also hope secure $1 million through the Department of Forest, Parks, and Rec to stand up a new water quality assistance program for our loggers, knowing that as climate change shortens our winters and wettens our spring, they need help adapting their practices to manage water quality and be able to work in the woods. So have championed things for our forest and farm economy, and will continue to do that if elected to the Senate.
Thank you. I love this question because I am from a farming family in a farming area in a farming state, and I have been working in and around farms since the time that I could walk, and the green light is also not on. I currently run, and I take I have a lot of respect for our farm, so I don't like to call it a farm. We have a family farm. We have a subsistence homestead. And we have goats and we have chickens and we have bees, and I get my bees from Josh, the apiary you worked on.
My ex-husband.
Yeah. So I love this question because I have been in and around agriculture my entire life, and it's one of the things that I love most about the state of Vermont. Back in 2014, the state was polled, and I think it was 91% of Vermonters believe that Vermont dairy is integral to our way of life. And I think that we need to find ways to make sure that it stays a part of Vermont's life. And I think one of the biggest problems that we're facing around, when I'm going to, again, talk specifically about dairy, is the misinformation that's out there about dairy. When I go around and I talk to all the farms that I've been talking to, one of the things that I keep hearing is a lot of uninformed people that don't know what it is to run a dairy farm. They don't know what it's like to work with the cows. And they think that when they see a cow lying in a stall in a barn, that they're being abused, that they're hurting. When you see a cow lying down and they're chewing cud, they're happy, they're content, and they're able, and they're living their best life there in the barn as best as they can. So I've taken steps already, and it's something I've been talking with a lot of the farmers about, and having farms sign up for is I would like to start a program where that's not going to cost any money, but it's going to be able to allow people in the public to come and visit farms on open houses throughout the Northeast Kingdom and throughout the state, so they can come in and learn more about the process. And I think there's a lot to be said about opening up those farms to allow people just to learn about what it's like to work in the dairy industry and work in the agriculture industry as a whole. And I invite all the farmers in the area to come to a cookout that I'm doing next week. It's for the agriculture community. I'm inviting Josh, and I'm inviting all the other farms from the area just to come together and talk to me and tell me about the problems that they've been facing. So, thanks.
1 minute, rebuttal. You want a rebuttal? Okay. This will probably be the last question.
Yeah, I'm pretty close. All right, Sam, we'll start with this round. Given that Casella is the only landfill in the state, and there's an increasing pressure to move the landfill away from sensitive climate areas, i.e. on waterways, what do you recommend the legislature do to address Vermont's future waste management needs?
Right. So I agree that we need to have a long-term solution for our landfills. We live in a hyper-consumerist society where we produce a lot of trash, and we need to have places to put those trash. And I agree that we shouldn't have those facilities in areas where it is going to leach into waterways. And I also, I applaud the efforts that Kinsella has taken to try to reduce every instance of that leaching as much as possible. And I do support measures to try to find long-term solutions and try to find other locations for those landfills, and not just restricted to the Northeast Kingdom. We should have started the process for finding a new location for a dump years ago. And I'm glad the conversation is happening now. And I really hope that the state doesn't just keep it in the Northeast Kingdom, that we can move it around and we can have it in other areas of the state. And I suppose that's my answer to that question. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. This is a really important topic for our community, where the current location of the landfill is a threat to our water quality and our health and well-being, and it feels like just one of many examples of where the kingdom gets all the things, right? We get the industrial wind turbines, we get the asbestos mine, we get the correctional facility, and even though we only produce 7% of the waste, we're here accepting all the waste from across the entire state. And that's why, with other colleagues from the region, I've co-sponsored legislation to do a number of things. We've put forward ideas to limit the acceptance of waste so that we don't take it from out of state, and to put a moratorium on the experimental PFAS leachate treatment facility. And I've also co-sponsored bills to develop a long-term solid waste management plan. Right now, the cells are permitted for another 16 years of capacity, and beyond that, we have no plan. And it's probably as much as we try to continue to improve recycling and closed loop system, it's likely we're going to continue to produce waste. And so our bill looked at establishing a commission to look at alternative sites and make recommendations and put forward a long-term plan for solid waste. So this is an issue that I've been fighting for our region in the past and will continue to be a strong advocate for moving forward.
Time for one more.
Okay. A rule change by the Legislative Committee on Rulemaking in 2022 requires 35% of new and lightly used vehicles sold in Vermont by 2026 to be zero emissions. By 2030, this requirement is 100%. In 2022, when the bill was passed, emission vehicles were in the state of Vermont, 0% emission vehicles in the state of Vermont were at 7%. Given Vermont's aging electrical infrastructure, the inability to add the needed green energy renewals to meet that goal, and Vermont's weather, which often leaves people without electricity for days, how is the state realistically supposed to meet those goals? And that one will be, I think, Katherine. Yep.
Yeah, great. I don't support mandating changes in behavior. I think it's great if folks want to move to an EV. I have one myself, and we have solar panels, but I think that should be something that folks elect to do for themselves. I think the concerns about the lack of infrastructure across Vermont, especially in our rural communities, is deeply concerning, as well as the capacity to generate sufficient electricity. If everyone adopted EVs tomorrow, we'd be burning more natural gas to generate enough power to power all of those cars. And so I think we need to revisit this timeline and move in the direction of creating incentives that encourage people to consider adopting things, but not mandating adoption of new technology, especially before we have the infrastructure or the renewable energy in place to support that.
Yeah, so I absolutely do not support those measures. Tabitha said it in the question. Up here in the Northeast Kingdom, with the weather that we have, electric vehicles just do not make sense. We talk about the dump. What are we going to do with the batteries? If we're mandating an entire state to go to electric vehicles, we need to have a recycling system in place for those batteries. We need to have a recycling system in place for the cars. We need to look at the impact that that's going to have on our emergency services. As many of us, I'm sure, are aware, electrical fires, when it comes to electric vehicles, are very dangerous, especially they're dangerous for the operators, they're dangerous for the emergency services. And we need to be able to have a solution to address that. And I think there's just way too many questions surrounding these, and the timeline is way too fast. And I agree, we should not be mandating any one practice. But up here in the kingdom, electric vehicles just do not make sense. A number of years ago, I remember Elon Musk, the man who would benefit from mandates for electric vehicles, as he owns Tesla, an electric vehicle manufacturer. He was saying that the technology is not there and will not be there for a long time regarding electric vehicles. So, no, I do not support the mandates on that, and I do not think that we should be taking any steps towards that without having a lot more stuff in place, including the recycling, including the emergency services. And I don't want to force, especially with the federal guidelines that are being passed down when it regards long-haul trucking, forcing trucking companies to adopt electric vehicles, electric trucks. That's just not going to make sense, and that's just going to pass on the cost to the consumers down the line. And here in Vermont, we already can't afford to live here, and I don't want to make it that we can't afford to shop here either. So, that's my thinking, I suppose.
Do Okay, so,
That's all the time for the questions now. We will give the two candidates 3 minutes each for their concluding remarks. You did rock, paper, scissors. You can decide amongst yourself who goes first for this one.
I went first last time. You want to go first this time?
Sure. There's very little more that I can say that I haven't already said during this debate. The affordability question is the number one thing going in. We need to look at the voting records of every legislator who's running for re-election in the state of Vermont, and we need to be very, very acutely aware of things that people have said and things that people have done. And I think that going into this, I'm going to be rock solid, working across the aisle, working with the governor, working with all the other legislators, to make sure that we find solutions to the problems that we have, not solutions to problems that we come up with. I think Vermont is a beautiful state. It's a state that my family has lived in for generations and generations, and I do not want that to end with me. I'm very happy and very enthusiastic about the support and the endorsements that I've gotten from Governor Scott, Governor Jim Douglas, and the vast majority of the Northeast Kingdom legislators. I love this region. It is a part of me. I want to stay here as long as I can. I want to die here and be buried here. And I think that it's going to take a lot of common sense people who are willing to go down there and to work across the aisle and to really put the constituency first. That is the biggest focus for me going into the Senate, and I'm excited to work with all of my colleagues in the Senate and all of my colleagues in the House and the governor to accomplish those things. And I think it's going to take a lot of people, it's going to take a lot of thoughts and a lot of ideas, and I think it's going to take a lot of working with the public as well. The legislators represent the public, but you can't represent a public that you don't talk to. So one of the things that I've been mulling around is I would like to rent an office space to be able to have monthly office hours to allow voters to know that I will be there at these times and you can come talk to me and you can bring me your issues. I plan to hold monthly roundtables from town to town, traveling around the district and finding locations where voters can come and they can talk to me and they can bring me their issues. You know, what I don't like about debates is that it's all about talking, and I'm more of a listener. I think that when you're in a legislative office, I think you should be more about listening. I think that when you're having people come to you their issues, you should be sitting there with your ears open and your mouth closed, taking notes and really representing what the people want in Montpelier. And I think that's what people want right now. They want a legislature that listens to them. They want a legislature that represents them and their values, that actually takes what they say to heart. Going around, I hear that people are not connected with their legislators. They're not connected with the government, and many of them don't understand how it works, and I think that's very unfortunate. I think that is a failure of our current system, is that the public is not engaged. And you know, every election cycle we talk about low information voters, and that's really sad to me because I want every voter to have a really, really equal say in what happens in the legislature. So I think a lot of that has to do with listening, and that's one of the things that I'm pledging to do. As a candidate, I can't promise too many things. As a candidate, you can't promise too many things because you don't know who's going to be willing to work with you and who won't be. You have an entire chamber of other legislators to convince and to work with you on these things, and if they're not willing to do that, then you can't fulfill those promises. So as a candidate, we can't make many promises, but the promises that I will make is that I will listen, that I will be present, and that I will take what you say seriously, and I will bring the values of the Northeast Kingdom, the values and the culture and the heritage that I have to Montpelier, and that I will represent you well. So thank you.
Thanks. I want to start off by thanking Sam for a really civil and respectful conversation, and thank you all again for being here with us in person and online. And I want to close by emphasizing what's at the heart of our campaign, bringing people together to fight for the future of the kingdom. I think we do our best work when everyone is heard, when we find common ground, and we move forward together. Constituents who have been in my district know well that I hold monthly office hours, that I send out regular legislative updates through email and to the local papers, and do comprehensive end-of-session reports. And then I begin every session by reaching out to key stakeholders and inviting folks to respond to a survey about the issues that matter most to them. And there are bills, like the EMS bill that I've championed, that came directly from constituents flagging issues that were important to them that I was able to take action on. And so with Senator Starr's retirement, our region's representation is at a crossroads. We face big challenges, and we can't afford inaction or extremes. We need practical, common sense solutions and experienced leaders who know how to put our needs first and how to get things done. Like Senator Starr, I'm dedicated to working for our region, not a party. I have a proven track record of bipartisan collaboration in the House and getting things done for us. And I'm ready to carry on Senator Starr's legacy as a fierce advocate for the kingdom. I will fight to make Vermont more affordable with tax cuts for the middle class and working to lower the cost of housing and health care, childcare, and elder care. And I will work to keep our community safe, to protect public education while reining in costs, and safeguarding those individual freedoms and rural programs that are so essential for us. Whether you're a conservative, a moderate, an independent, a Republican, or Democrat, I want to earn your vote. And I promise that I will always represent everyone in the district, regardless of their party. I know that when we come together, we can build a brighter future, one where everyone can afford to live and work and raise a family and retire with dignity. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you for being here. Together, we can fight for the future of rural Vermont. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and you deserve a round of applause too, and so does Todd from NEK-TV, Carrie, and Tabitha, and the legislators. Both of them did a great job. So thank you all. Have a great night.